Missing child cases have critical windows. Statistics are merciless. 90% chance of finding them alive in the first hour. 50% in the second hour, after the third hour, ... 15%. Every passing minute reduces the odds of that little heart continuing. To beat, police know this. FBI knows this. Search and rescue specialists know this. But today, at Central Park, 62-year-old Martha Wilson, who sells flowers, also knew this. And she didn't just know it when 7-year-old Emma went missing. The switch in Martha's mind flipped on. Protocols she'd learned 30 years ago in the Pentagon's dark corridors kicked into gear. 2:30 p.m., Emma's disappearance was reported. 2:45 p.m., Martha Wilson closed her flower stand and mentally divided the entire park into 16 sectors. 3 p.m., when police arrived, Martha had already organized the search group into 4 teams, established communication frequency, and calculated possible escape routes, because Martha Wilson's past was filled with life-and-death operations, forgotten wars, and plans that brought lost soldiers home. And today, the experience from those dark years would kick in to save little Emma. ... Welcome to Human Stories. Before we continue with this powerful tale of hidden expertise and a mother's worst nightmare, tell me in the comments what city are you watching from today? If you believe these stories of everyday heroes deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Asterisk, the flower stand at the southeast entrance of Central Park had been Martha Wilson's domain for exactly 4 years. 2 months and 16 days. Not that anyone was counting except Martha, who had a mind that automatically cataloged details most people would never notice. Every morning at 7 a.m. sharp, she wheeled her modest cart to the same spot near the park entrance, arranged her flowers with military precision, and settled into what looked like a peaceful retirement routine. Roses in the front row, organized by color intensity. Daisies to the left, tulips to the right when in season, price tags positioned at exact 45-degree angles for optimal visibility. To the joggers, dog walkers, and tourists who passed by daily, Martha was simply a pleasant older woman with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing sensible shoes and cardigans that had seen better decades. She had a kind smile for children, patient answers for customers who couldn't decide between the roses and carnations, and the sort of forgettable presence that made people feel comfortable. What they didn't see was how Martha's eyes constantly moved, tracking patterns of foot traffic, noting which paths were most congested at different times, mentally mapping every entrance, exit, and blind spot in her section of the park. They didn't notice how she positioned herself to maintain sightlines across multiple pathways, or how she instinctively knew which of the regular park maintenance workers was running late on any given day. These weren't the habits of a woman who'd spent her career arranging flowers that Saturday afternoon started like hundreds of others. October in New York, leaves turning gold and red, families taking advantage of the crisp autumn weather. Martha was arranging a bouquet for a young man planning to propose when she heard a mother's voice cutting through the ambient park noise with that particular tone that makes every parent in earshot freeze. Emma, Emma, where are you? Martha's hands stilled on the stems. She'd heard that exact inflection before, in a dozen different languages, in places where mothers called for children who might never answer back. The voice belonged to Emma Chen, a woman Martha recognized as a semi-regular customer who worked somewhere in Midtown and often brought her daughter to the park on weekends. Emma was 7 years old, gap-toothed, with pigtails that never stayed neat and a tendency to chase pigeons with the intense focus of a miniature scientist. Sarah was standing about 50 yards away near the playground, turning in slow circles, her voice getting higher with each call. Other parents were starting to look up from their conversations, that universal parental anxiety beginning to spread through the area like ripples in a pond. Martha set down the bouquet and stepped out. From behind her cart, her movements were calm, deliberate. But there was something different about her posture now, straighter, more alert, like a piece of machinery coming online. She approached Sarah with steady steps, her voice cutting through the woman's rising panic with unexpected authority. "Ma'am, when did you last see your daughter?" Sarah turned toward Martha, tears already forming. She was right there on the swings. I was talking to another mom for maybe 10 minutes, and when I looked back, what's she wearing? Martha's questions came in rapid succession, her tone professional, but not unkind. Pink jacket, blue jeans, white sneakers, with rainbow laces. She has her hair in 2 braids today. Martha nodded, already processing. How old? 7. Any medical conditions? Allergies? Places she likes to hide? Sarah stared at Martha, surprised by the specificity of the questions. No medical issues. She loves to climb trees. She's fascinated by the ducks at the reservoir. While Sarah answered, Martha's eyes were scanning the immediate area, noting sightlines, foot traffic patterns, and potential concealment points. Her mind was automatically calculating a small child, attracted to climbing in water, last seen approximately 15 minutes ago based on Sarah's timeline. We need to call the police, Sarah said, reaching for her phone with shaking hands. Absolutely, Martha agreed. But we also need to start searching immediately. Every minute counts. What happened next would later puzzle everyone who witnessed it. Martha Wilson, the quiet flower lady, began organizing a search operation with the precision of someone who'd done it many times before. She approached the nearest group of parents, a father with 2 teenagers, a jogger who'd stopped to see what was happening, and an elderly man walking his dog. Excuse me, we have a missing child situation. I need your help. Her voice carried an authority that made people instinctively listen. Sir, she addressed the father, I need you and your boys to search the playground area and the immediate surrounding paths. Look under every piece of equipment, behind every tree large enough to hide a child. She turned to the jogger. You know the park layout? I need you to check the reservoir area, specifically around the Alice in Wonderland statue and the model boat pond. She's attracted to water and ducks. The elderly man with the dog found himself assigned to coordinate, with other dog walkers using their animals' familiarity with the park to check areas off the main paths. Everyone needs to stay in constant visual contact with at least one other searcher, Martha continued. If you find anything, clothing, toy, any sign of her, don't touch it. Call out immediately. We reconvene here in 20 minutes regardless. The impromptu search team dispersed. Sarah stared at Martha in amazement. How do you know how to do this? Martha was already pulling out her own phone, but she paused to meet Sarah's eyes. I've done this before, she said simply. When the police unit arrived 8 minutes later, they found something unusual, an organized search operation already in progress, with clear sectors assigned, regular check-ins established, and a command post set up at Martha's flower cart. Officer Rodriguez, a 15-year veteran of the NYPD, stepped out of his patrol car expecting to find the usual chaos of a missing child call. Instead, he found Martha Wilson calmly coordinating search teams via her cell phone, while simultaneously briefing arriving park security on the situation. Officer, thank you for responding, Martha said, approaching him with a professionalism. That immediately caught his attention. Missing child, Emma Chen, age 7, last seen approximately 25 minutes ago at the playground. I've organized preliminary search teams covering the immediate area, reservoir section, and climbing structures. Here's what we know. Rodriguez found himself taking notes as Martha provided a detailed briefing that covered the child's description, last known location, behavioral patterns, and the search grid she'd established. It was the kind of organized response he usually only saw from experienced emergency personnel. Ma'am, have you worked in law enforcement? Rodriguez asked. Martha hesitated for just a moment. I've had experience with search operations, she said carefully. By now, more resources were arriving. A second police unit, park rangers, and a growing crowd of concerned citizens who'd heard about the missing child. Martha seamlessly integrated each new resource into her search plan, assigning sectors based on personnel capabilities and park geography. Detective Lisa Santos arrived 20 minutes after the initial call, expecting to take command of what was usually a disorganized civilian response. Instead, she found a textbook search operation already in progress. Who's running this? Santos, asked The flower lady, Rodriguez replied, gesturing toward Martha, who was currently consulting what appeared to be a hand-drawn map of the park with impressive detail. Santos approached Martha, her detective instincts immediately. Picking up on something unusual? Ma'am, I'm Detective Santos. I understand you've been coordinating the search. Asterisk, that's correct, Martha replied. We've covered approximately 60% of the high-probability areas. No signs yet, but we're maintaining systematic coverage patterns to avoid gaps. Martha's answer was interrupted by her phone buzzing. She answered immediately. Team 3 report. A pause. Copy that. Continue south along the reservoir path. Check the Shakespeare Garden area. She looked back at Santos. I'm sorry, Detective. What was your question? Your background? This level of organization doesn't just happen. Martha was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing how much to reveal. I used to work in logistics, she said finally. Operations planning. Before Santos could follow up, a shout came from the direction of the reservoir. We found something. And Santos ran toward the voice, which belonged to the jogger Martha had assigned to the water areas. He was standing near a grove of trees about 50 yards from the reservoir, holding up a small pink jacket. It was caught on a branch about 6 feet up this oak tree. The jogger called out. Martha reached the scene first, her eyes immediately scanning the area around the tree. She climbed up, she said, pointing to small scuff marks on the bark. Look at the branch patterns. She could have made it to that big limb. Santos arrived and immediately called for the crime scene unit, but Martha was already moving, her eyes tracking something the others had missed. She didn't fall, Martha announced. Look at the ground. No disturbance pattern that would indicate a fall. She climbed down deliberately. How can you tell? Santos asked. Martha pointed to barely visible depressions in the soft earth near the base of the tree. Foot impressions consistent with someone climbing down facing the tree, not falling away from it. And look. She indicated a faint trail of disturbed leaves leading away from the tree, toward a dense area of bushes. She went that way, Martha said with certainty. Probably heard the search teams calling and got scared. She's hiding. Martha led the group toward the thicket, but instead of crashing through the undergrowth, she stopped and raised her voice. In a calm, non-threatening tone, Emma, my name is Martha. Your mom is looking for you, sweetheart. You're not in trouble. We just want to make sure you're okay. Silence. Martha tried again, her voice gentler, but carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Emma, I know you can hear me. It's getting dark, and your mom is very worried. Can you tell me if you're hurt? A small voice came from deep within the bushes. I'm not hurt, but I can't get out. Okay, sweetheart, that's fine. Hand. Martha extended her arm toward the thicket. Can you crawl toward my voice? 5 minutes later, Emma Chen emerged from the undergrowth, dirty and tear-streaked but unharmed. The reunification with her mother was emotional enough to bring tears to the eyes of everyone present, including the hardened Detective Santos. But Santos wasn't done with Martha Wilson. As the crowd dispersed and the emergency response wound down, she approached the flower vendor, who was quietly packing up her cart, as if nothing unusual had happened. Mrs. Wilson, I need to ask you some questions. Martha looked up from arranging her remaining inventory. Of course, Detective. That wasn't beginner's luck back there. You ran a search operation like someone with serious training. Military? Martha hesitated, then nodded slowly. Army, a long time ago. What did you do in the Army? Another pause. Operations planning, logistics support. Santos wasn't satisfied. Mrs. Wilson, I've worked with military personnel before. You did today goes beyond basic logistics. You ran that search like someone who's done it in hostile territory. Martha finished arranging her flowers, clearly stalling for time. Finally, she looked up and met Santos' eyes directly. Detective, some conversations are better had over coffee than standing next to a flower cart. An hour later, they sat in a small cafe near the park. Martha had ordered black coffee and sat with the posture of someone who'd spent years in briefing rooms. I served for 22 years, Martha began. Started as an enlisted logistics specialist, ended up as a major. In operations planning? What kind of operations? Martha was quiet for a long moment, the kind where soldiers go missing behind enemy lines and need to be brought home. Santos leaned forward. Search and rescue, among other things. Iraq, Afghanistan, some places that don't make it into the newspapers. I planned recovery operations for missing personnel, evacuation routes for compromised positions, emergency extractions when everything went wrong. That's why you knew how to organize the search today. Martha nodded. When you've spent 2 decades planning operations to find missing people in places where mistakes get people killed, finding a lost child in Central Park becomes ... manageable. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Martha smiled slightly. Detective, I've been selling flowers in that park for 4 years. I've helped lost tourists find the subway, given directions to confused joggers, and watched hundreds of children play safely while their parents socialized. Nobody needed to know that I used to plan military operations until today. Santos studied Martha's face. How many people did you bring home? Officially, classified, unofficially. ... Martha stared into her coffee. Enough to know that every minute counts, and organization saves lives. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Finally, Santos spoke again. The mother, Emma Chen, asked me to thank you. She said she's never seen anyone take charge like that. Martha shrugged. I just did what needed to be done. No, Santos said firmly. You did what you were trained to do. There's a difference. The next Monday, Martha was back at her flower cart at the usual time, arranging her inventory with the same methodical precision as always. To most passersby, nothing had changed. But word had spread quietly through the park community about what had happened over the weekend. Emma Chen stopped by with Emma, shyly presented Martha with a drawing of flowers that looked suspiciously like the ones in Martha's cart. Emma wanted to thank you properly, Sarah said, and I wanted to ask... Do you give any kind of safety talks? For kids? Martha looked down at Emma, who was studying her with the intense curiosity that only Sarah can muster. What kind of safety talks? Martha asked. Just what to do if they get lost. How to stay safe. You seem to know about these things. Martha considered this. I might be able to do that, she said finally. Detective Santos also stopped by that Monday, not on official business, but as someone who'd been genuinely impressed by what she'd witnessed. I did some checking, Santos said without preamble. Major Martha Wilson, retired 22 years of service, specialist in personnel recovery operations, multiple commendations for successful extraction missions in hostile territories. Looked up from her roses and I wanted to ask if you'd be interested in doing some consulting work. We have search and rescue teams that could learn from your experience. Martha was quiet for a moment. Detective, I retired for a reason. I wanted a quiet life, selling flowers, not thinking about missing soldiers or failed operations. I understand that, but what you did on Saturday, it saved a little girl's life. Your expertise could save more lives. Martha arranged a bouquet of daisies, her movements precise and practiced. Let me think about it, she said finally. That evening, as Martha locked up her cart and prepared to head home to her small apartment, she paused to look back at the park. Families were heading home, couples walking hand in hand, joggers making their final circuits of the day for 4 years. This had been her world, peaceful, predictable, safely removed from the chaos and urgency of her former life. She'd convinced herself that selling flowers was enough, that she'd done her service and earned the right to fade into civilian anonymity, but Saturday had reminded her of something she'd tried to forget. The feeling of using her skills to bring someone home, safely. The satisfaction of successful planning, efficient execution, and a positive outcome. Major Martha Wilson had spent 2 decades bringing lost soldiers home from the most dangerous places on Earth. Martha, the flower lady, had just brought one lost little girl home from Central Park. Maybe, she thought as she walked toward the subway. There wasn't as much difference between the two as she'd been trying to believe. 3 weeks later, the New York Post ran a small human interest story about a search and rescue exercise in Central Park. where NYPD officers trained with a consultant. Described only as a retired military logistics specialist with extensive experience in personnel recovery operations. The accompanying photo showed a silver-haired woman in a practical cardigan, pointing to a map while uniformed officers took notes. In the background, just barely visible, sat a flower cart. Asterisk Martha Wilson never sought recognition for her military service, never talked about the classified operations she'd planned, never mentioned the soldiers who came home because of her expertise. But when Emma Chen got lost in Central Park, that expertise had been exactly where it was needed most. Sometimes the most valuable skills hide in plain sight, carried by quiet people who serve in their own way, asking nothing more than the chance to help when help is needed. And sometimes, the flower lady at the park entrance knows more about finding lost people than anyone could possibly imagine.